In this lesson, we are going to do the data manipulation with SQLite. So we are going to use SQLite and build an application where we have already data inserted with some values, and we are going to use some endpoints which are going to grab some things from the database, filter something, and return some values. So all the endpoints are going to be connected to the database. We need to retrieve the data from the database and do the manipulation with the SQLite syntax. So in order to achieve this, first we need to make sure that we have installed the SQLite. In order to make sure this, what we need to do is we need to first go to our terminal and write SQLite todos app.db. So if I just go and just open terminal, and if I just see to my existing todos.app, what I need to do is, if I can write SQLite 3, it should open a window like this. If you have the window like this, it means you have successfully already installed SQLite. So the other thing we are going to do is we are going to recall from our previous lesson that we had the todos app data created. Now we in the todos app don't have the todos app, but todos app db in the main.py, so we are going to use this code first. The other part is just commented now, because later we are going to use all the project code to create the project with the database connection and all the endpoints. But currently we need to first create our database table using this main.py, using the models, using the todos table. So in order to accomplish this, I just need to go and say just unicorn main reload and it will go and create me our necessary todos app.db. And in order to make sure that everything is working, what we need to do, we can go and say SQLite 3 todos app.db and then just write .schema, and we can see that we already have the table inside our database with the ID, title, description, priority, complete column, and the ID is a primary key. So we can get rid of this now. What we are going to do now, we are going to have our database. It's now empty. We are going to insert some values into our database. So in order to accomplish this, we are going to use these 3 commands, and we are going to install random values. So as you remember from the SQL queries, in order to insert something into the database, we need to use the syntax insert into table name, which is todos in our case. In the brackets, we are going to separate by columns the column names, the title, description, priority, and the complete, and we are going to use the corresponding column values in order to store everything in the database. So this is first command. We are going to insert 3 rows. Let's line by line execute this. In order to accomplish this, I need to go to SQLite again, 3 todos app.db, and then I need to paste this first line, and then after I finished, I need to insert the second line in our database. So I need to paste it like this here, and then I need to also go and paste the last one here, which is going to be this one. I need to go and paste also this. After I finish this, what I need to do, in order to check everything is inserted, I can use the SQL query, select everything from todos, and you can see we have all the 3 rows with the columns, but this is not that beautiful. We can just change the mode to markdown in order to get a more beautiful print of the data frame to the SQL table. So here, if I go just say and select everything from the todos, we can see now we have a beautiful picture like creating a pandas data frame. We have the columns, the ID, title, description, priority, and the complete. And in our case, we also have the values with the ID 1 to 3, the title, the 3 items, and etc. What we can do, we can go and to explore a little bit the functionality of the SQLite 3. We can also insert some other value and delete in order for you to practice a little bit the SQLite syntax, how to use the SQL queries. So you can go and just now insert one more row there using insert option in the todos, And then, as you know, if the ID is the primary key, the new value is inserted with the ID of 4. In order to get rid of this row, we can go and just delete this row from the to-dos table. So for that, we need to delete from to-dos where ID is equal to 4. So I'm going to just paste this here and delete from to-dos table where ID is equal to 4. And if I now, when you say select everything from to-dos, you can see that I have the original table with 3 values as expected. So now, after we have the SQL database, we need to go and use some endpoints which are going to use this database, read the data from this database, and then do some manipulation and return something. So for that, I have created a big application. So before that, in order to use the application, please go and install these 2 libraries, the starlet and the passlib bycrypt. They are not going to use this, but this is very useful one, the passlib in order to make sure that you know how to authenticate yourself with the username and password. This is very good library to use for password authentication. In this project, we are going to just do simple things. We are going to use just the database connection. We are going to retrieve some data from the database and not do any authentication. I have already created a todos.app where I have the database.py, so where I have all the sessions, like I have the database URL, I have the todos.app.db, I have the engine, I have the session local, and I have the declarative base, as you remember. I have the models, which is for our to-dos table with the ID, title, description, priority, and the complete. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to add the endpoints, and for that I need the following functionality. So I'm going to uncomment everything here. So for first, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create DB connection using the getDB function, which is going to create the session local and then yield the DB connection, and then in the end close the connection, which is very important. Whenever you are opening any connection to the database, you need to make sure every time in the end to close it. We will create also the todos request class validated with the Pydantic base model. So we are going to use the title, which is description, priority, incomplete, all validated with some fields with the following values. You can go over and read this. And now I'm going to create a db.dependency variable, which is going to be annotated by session, and it's going to depend on the getDB function that I've just specified. And all my endpoints are going to be validated using the DB dependency, so that whenever I use the endpoint, I need to make sure that I'm using the SQLite syntax and going and grabbing everything from the database, connecting to the database, reading the data, filtering it, returning something. So in order to understand this, let's first have the very simple example where I'm going to use a GET request, and with this slash endpoint, where I'm going to just query from the DB, from the todos table, just everything. So I'm going to get every record from here, which is here, using the SQLite syntax .all, and here I'm going to pass the function the DB dependency, which means I'm going to create DB dependency, connect to the DB, and read the data from the todos table. The other thing is going to read data. Endpoints are going to be, one of them is to getting data from the todos DB and reading data with the help of the todo ID. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass the todo ID, I'm going to read the data, pass the DB dependency, and I'm going to create a variable which is going to query from the database todos, filter from the database from todos ID equaling the todo ID, and I'm going to fetch the first record. And now I'm saying if the to-do model is not none, so I found this record with this ID, I'm going to return this model. Otherwise, I'm going to raise an HTTP exception with the status code of 404, where the detail is to-do is not found. The same way, we're going to use the post request now with the DB dependency with a to-do request validated by Pydantic. In this case, I'm going to create again a to-do model, a to-do request dict validated by Pydantic, and then in order to create something in the database and update the database, we need to always make sure that we're adding something to the database. And the final thing is, the most important thing is to in order to have all the changes inside the database in place, you need to make sure to use the db.commit command, which is going to do in place change in database. The other thing is the put one. When we want to update something using the to-do ID, again with the help of the to-do ID, we are going to query database fetching the record which we want to change, and here raise the exception if it's not correct ID again, and then we are going to change all the attributes here of the title, description, priority, and complete to the newly to-do request title, description, priority, and complete. We're going to add this to our to-do.model, and then we are going to do db.commit. And in the same way, we are going to use the delete endpoint, which is going to delete a record from the database using the to-do.id. And if it's found, then it's going to, if it's not found, it's going to raise us an HTTP exception with a status code of 404 saying that its to-do is not found, and we are going to query from the database with this ID and use the top.delete method in order to delete this record from our database. And finally, I'm going to commit this in our database using the db.commit method. So everything is already ready, we're deleting something. So in order to run our application, what we need to do, of course, we need to go, and then in our terminal, we can just exit from here now, and then we need to just say we want to ubicorn, just main/f -- reload. It is going to run our application, and if I go to localhost/docs, I can see that now I have the to-dos application, where, for example, if I go and say read all, if I go and try it out, as you remember, it's going to get all the records from the database. So if I go and read this, you can see that I have all the 3 records that are present in the database. So we have created this 3 records, as you remember. We had 3 records with the columns of ID, title, complete, description, and the priority. So we have also the get with the to-do ID. If I want to get a record with the specific ID, I can go and here give an ID, for example, let's say 2. If I execute this, you can see that this is returning for me from the database the record with the ID 2, and everything works correct. And for the other things, you can go and experiment yourself. So you can go and update something in the database using the put method. So you need to specify here what you are going to change, for which ID you are going to change. And you can also post something, you can add something to your database. You can go and say that I want to create a new record with the ID, title, description, priority, and complete. As you know, ID is a primary key, so it's going to be automatically auto-incremented, so you don't need to specify it. You can just go and say give me the title, description, priority, complete, and add something to your database. So this is how you can complete a fast API application using the database, how to insert data to a database using the SQLite commands, how to use the SQL queries to insert some data, how to manipulate data, how to just make the request, how to query, to filter something from the database. Of course, you can do like uploading a file, a CSV file, and do the manipulations with the pandas data frame. This is one the reason we are using like DB, because in order to read something from database, it's far more faster than to reading with the pandas data frame. So sometimes some people prefer to do it with the SQL Alchemy to have the data in the database and reading in the database. Some people prefer to use the pandas. So you have now learned all the options, how to manipulate data with the pandas, how to manipulate data with having a data in the database, and then using the SQLite syntax to query that data. And here we have covered the examples on how to write your own application with some examples, like we had the student application, we had also now the to-dos application. So you can go over with the project and then do some changes, and then go to the docs and try it out, request yourself, so that your hand get used to everything in the fast API. So this is it for this lesson.